This video was brought to you by Belroy. The Conservative Party is an absolute monarchy moderated by regicide. That was William Hague's assessment of the party he used to lead, when asked to describe the leadership structure of the Conservatives. And it's this unique leadership structure that has caused so many problems for the Tories as of late. It allowed rebels to topple not just Johnson, but also Sunak, with it creating intense factionalism, something that's now tearing the Tory party apart. As things stand, the Tories are more than 20 points behind in the polls. And the question right now is not if Sunak loses the next election, but by how much. In Westminster circles, there tends to be a collective view that the Tory party has existed for centuries and will always exist. But that isn't necessarily true. Realignments do happen, and parties that were once dominant fade into obscurity, especially if they can't reunite after a devastating election loss. So some are now wondering whether the Tory party could go down this road in the next few years. With this in mind, let's take a look at the current state of the Tory party, what could happen in the next election, and ultimately whether we're about to witness the demise of the Conservatives. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. As you'll know if you've watched any of our recent videos on this channel, or even just have the most basic grasp of UK politics, it's fair to say that the Conservative Party and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak aren't in a particularly good place right now. The party seems more concerned about settling scores amongst themselves than fighting Labour and trying to improve their poor standing in the polls. And Sunak is having to dedicate more time to this than actually managing the country. And ultimately, this is because factionalism has truly set in, and Sunak is now stuck trying to assert his authority as a one-nation centrist, while also desperately attempting not to frustrate the right of the Tory party so much that they launch a leadership challenge against him. And Sunak is also struggling to assert himself as a prime minister with a distinct policy platform, largely because any attempts at this are overshadowed by party management issues. For instance, his King's Speech was the longest since 2005, but also contained the fewest policy commitments since 2014. Every now and again, he does try and change the media narrative to something he's a bit more comfortable talking about it, like the Bletchley Park AI Safety Summit. But invariably, while these attempts might linger in the headlines for a couple of days, journalists always move back to discussions about the state of the Tory party. And this has been noticed by the electorate, who are punishing the incumbent government with a more than 20-point polling deficit. And the problem is that as this bad polling persists, the factionalism seems to get worse, with both centrists and the right of the party becoming more and more convinced that if they had it their way, they could turn the polling around. And if this doom spiral continues, then not only could the Tories be looking at a stint out of office, but also potentially electoral oblivion. Electoral calculus, who use current polling information to predict seat shares in an election, suggests that the Tories could be on track to win only 113 seats, which would mean them losing a huge 232 seats. Labour, on the other hand, would gain 240 seats, bringing them up to a whopping 443 seats in the Commons. Labour, overall then, based on this maths, Labour would have a majority of 236 seats. Now, it's worth stressing that these polls are simply a snapshot of how people feel in a particular moment, and this is in no way guaranteed to happen. However, it does give us an insight and an indication as to how bad things are for the Tories. For some context, the largest post-war electoral majority was achieved by Tony Blair in 1997, when he entered Downing Street with a 178-seat majority. If electoral calculus are correct then this would make Starmer the most electorally successful Prime Minister in post-war history. Now, given the current state of the Tory party when they're in power, there's a real concern that an electoral defeat like this would only amplify their issues on the opposition benches. And that's largely because the two major parties in the UK are broad churches. The Tories broadly represent the right in the UK, but they don't have ideological distinctness. Their ideology ultimately shifts with different leaders, and how united they are depends on the strength of that leader. When Thatcher was in power, the party shifted towards the neoliberal right, while when Cameron was in power, the party shifted towards the One Nation centre. Generally, each faction of the party can tolerate each other, provided that elections are won and the party remains strong. But right now, the party doesn't look like they could possibly win an election, and Sunak doesn't appear all that strong. So this factionalism issue is only likely to spiral, and given the expected scale of the impending defeat, some worry that it could be enough to split the party altogether. With so few seats, the Tories wouldn't even have that much choice when it comes to their next leader. And this position too would be a poisoned chalice anyway. Another election would likely be another half-decade away, and in that time, their job would be to lead the unleadable and try and hold a bitterly divided party together. Perhaps then the new leader would decide that the best way to hold the party together is to end the infighting and begin a purge of the other factions. Or perhaps they hold their faction together and others jump ship. Either way, it's hard to see a world where factionalism doesn't increase and we don't see defections elsewhere. This isn't helped by the presence of Reform UK either. Reform is a right-wing party which was temporarily headed by Nigel Farage, but unlike the Tories, they're not a broad church. They represent the neoliberal right, and as such, infighting is kept to a minimum. Yes, they're a new party, and yes, polls predict that they'll only win about 7% of the vote in the next election. But for Tories frustrated with factionalism after the next election, this could be a good satellite party to jump ship to if the infighting does get particularly bad. Ultimately, the point we're making here is that things are already looking pretty devastating for the Tories right now, and the election is bound to make things worse. As such, there are fears that heightened factionalism could cause the party to split, making it difficult for them to re-enter office in the future, and possibly even leading to the permanent demise of the Tories. Now, this might sound far-fetched, but once dominant parties do sometimes falter. Realignment is rare, but it does happen. Now, when it comes to our journalism, you clearly expect us to provide high quality and responsible reporting. But shouldn't you also expect the same from the products you buy? I certainly do, and that's why for the last few years I've been exclusively using wallets, phone cases and passport cases from Bellroy, which is why I was super excited to hear that they wanted to sponsor some of our videos. As a loyal Bellroy user for the past few years now, I know quite how reliable and high quality their products are. My current phone case, for instance, is beautifully minimal in this stunning terracotta leather. That leather, by the way, is eco-tanned and achieved a gold rating from the Leather Working Group, recognizing excellence in environmental and labor practices. It's also just a beautiful, high-quality material that, in my experience, only gets better with age. Bellroy don't just talk about their environmental credentials either. They're also an officially certified B Corp company and have upcycled 10.5 million plastic water bottles, used 60,000 kilograms of industrial nylon cutoffs, and saved 15 million litres of water by using dry tan leathers. Their products are also just great to use. Designed around principles of minimalism, all of the Bellroy products that I've bought have been beautifully designed and easy to use, with their bags optimizing for functionality and efficiency, and their wallets are slimline enough to fit into any pocket. So find out why I've been using Bellroy for years now, and check out their huge array of products by clicking the link in the description. Plus, when you do, you'll get 10% off anything you order. Thanks to Bellroy for supporting the channel, and thanks to you for using our link.